Okay, roll call.
Councilmember Von Rudenberg,
Here.
Deputy Mayor Canestrino,
Here.
Deputy Mayor Sims,
Here.
Councilmember Pataglia,
Here.
Mayor LaBrus.
Here, and before you continue, Deb, let me just mention that Deputy Mayor Canestrino is on, but having technical problems with her video, so.
This meeting is being held in accordance with the Open Public Meeting Act, NJSA 10:4-6 et sec. Notice having been published according to law with a copy on file in the city clerk's office and a copy posted on the bulletin board in City Hall. Pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Act and recent regulations issued by the state of New Jersey, the following procedures will be in effect for public comment during this remote public meeting of the City Council. The public shall have an opportunity for comment during the designated public portion of this meeting. The time period for public comment is limited to 3 minutes for each speaker, and no person may address the council, more than once, except for speaking during an advertised public hearing for an ordinance. At the time designated for public comment, the mayor or other presiding officer of the council will recognize one speaker at a time. That speaker must identify himself or herself by full name and whether or not he or she resides in Hackensack. No other member of the public is permitted to speak unless recognized by the presiding officer, and other remote attendees may be muted during that time if necessary to eliminate background noise. Meeting attendees shall exhibit appropriate demeanor during this meeting as required by Section 37-15 of the City Code. In the event any member of the public becomes disruptive at any time, that individual may be muted by the presiding officer and will receive a warning that continued disruption may result in being prevented from speaking or removed from the meeting entirely. Zoom meeting platform has a texting function. However, this is to be used only for the purpose of advising the city's IT staff of any technical concerns or issues. The public may also submit written public comments to be audibly read into the record by the city clerk during the public portion of any remote public meeting of the City Council. Comments can be submitted by regular mail or by email to asabi@hackensack.org. Comments received less than 5 hours before the start of a meeting may be carried to the next meeting. Any person who actually speaks during the public comment portion of a remote public meeting may not also have comment read into the record. The city clerk will stop reading a written comment into the public record once it reaches the 3-minute limit. Duplicate written comments may be summarized and noted for the record in a consistent manner.
And that flag salute, please. Would everybody please rise for the flag salute? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America. To the republic
for which it stands,
one
nation,
Nation,
under God, indivisible,
with
with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we will go right to the agenda. And just record, there was no discussion of litigation. We did have an executive session previous to this meeting, but there was no discussion of employees or any litigation.
Okay. Mayor, can I proceed?
Yes, sir.
Okay. This is the committee of the whole agenda for Tuesday, March 9th, 2021, 6 p.m. First is the discussion of Hamilton Place, Anderson Street, residential parking only. Apparently back in November of 2020, there was a discussion at a council meeting and a letter that was sent to residents. So that letter has been resent, and the current letter says, City of Hackensack resident, this letter is to advise you that the following residential areas may be considered for resident parking stickers. Hamilton Place between Summit Ave and Prospect Ave, Anderson Street between Summit Ave and Prospect Ave. Resident parking stickers are $5 per vehicle, and your license and registration must match your home address. Stickers will be available for purchase at the Hackensack Police Department located at 225 State Street. Mayor and Council will further discuss this change to your residential area at our next Zoom council meeting. The meeting is scheduled for March 9th at 6 p.m. Your commitment and concerns are welcome. Please visit hackensack.org for Zoom login information. Should you have any questions, please contact the city manager's office at 201-646-3900, respectfully, Ted Ehrberg, City Manager. So that's the premise of this. And our HCOPs delivered letters to all the residents there. And we are, unless the council has something else, looking to proceed forward with this to offer some relief, because we think that residential parking stickers may provide some relief for those residents.
All right. Council, comments?
Did Captain Foley and them do a residency check on that street over there?
I know that the letter went out. I do not know, and I certainly can find out, Deputy Mayor, if those results were returned back to us or not. But from all that I can tell from the information supplied, that there appears to be some serious interest in getting this done to offer some relief to those residents on those streets.
All right, anybody else in the council? All right, this is a tough one, because a lot of these people live in some of these apartments. When these apartments were built in certain areas, they certainly didn't have, some of them have hardly any parking, and certainly not enough for the amount of units they had. And what we're seeing here is an overflow from some of these areas, and it's branching out into the residential areas, and people are ending up, eating up parking spaces in front of residential areas that are, where they can't even park by their own house. So it's a touchy subject. I always said that public streets are public streets, but I know what it's like living in a residential area as well. So, any other comments from the council on this before we move forward? Okay, now we're going to open this up to the public during the public session, which will be right after the discussion of the next three issues. All right, so let's move on to the next discussion.
Okay. Next is the discussion of the intro of the ordinance to make East Ward Street a one-way street. This was discussed back with Aaron from Suburban Engineering, that this street would be changed to a one-way, and that's how we're to proceed unless there's some change by the mayor and council. But it becomes a safety issue because of the alignments of the intersections there. So it would be prudent for us to make it one way.
Okay,
And this is eastbound from Main to River that we're talking about.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And to be clear, I just want to add also, this is going to finalize the, we're finalizing the Main Street two-way conversion. So this is also going to make sure that everything will be in place for that as well. So it also covers that, just to be clear.
Okay.
Yeah, cutting it from Main Street, as Ted said, they don't line up good, and that's not a good, that's a safety issue. So I think it's definitely the right thing to do there.
If you're going south on Main Street, will you be able to turn left onto Ward?
Say that
Yes,
again.
going west, going
Going
south.
Main, can you make a left onto Ward? Will it be allowed? Towards,
I believe so, John.
Yeah, I'm trying to get this in my head, and I'm not the world's best of the twists and turns of Hackensack. My ability to wander are limited here in the town, but I believe you can. But I will certainly double check that.
Right, because you can now, John. It's just if you tried to cross Main Street, because
Right.
it's not a perfect alignment, you'd kind of like have to wiggle through, and that's a dangerous situation.
no, I think it should remain. I just, wanted to know that it was going to stay there.
Oh, that's what I remember, but it's worth it for Ted to check it.
I will check it.
Yep.
Number 3 is a discussion of the UN zones and its specifications. The UN zone is the university zone, and it's in reference to medical offices which would change basically the configuration. Steve, do you want to step in front of this, or do you want me to?
Well, I mean, sure. I'm happy to speak about it. So, I think an issue has come up regarding the vagueness, and we've talked about this before in the zoning code. It needs to be addressed. Things need to be revised, and there's many vague questions about it. And one of the questions is whether an office like a doctor's office or a dentist's office is permitted in the university zone, which allows professional offices. And it doesn't really say one way or the other. I think, it certainly could be interpreted that they are permitted. I think that's the interpretation of our planner, Fran Reiner. I think the question is, going forward, is that something that the council is comfortable with, or does the council want to address that issue specifically and essentially create a separate definition in the zoning ordinance for a medical office, define it and state expressly where those types of offices can be situated? And to be clear, a medical office, might have, treatment ongoing, maybe even some same-day procedures, but it's not an overnight. That becomes a medical facility, which is defined. If there was any sort of reason for a patient to stay overnight, we're talking about a medical office. And this issue came up. I'm not exactly sure where it arose, but I know there have been some questions about that interpretation and whether the council wants to do something about that. So I would leave that for the council's consideration as to whether they feel the need to act in that area.
Okay. So in other words, like an ambulatory surgery would be included, correct?
I mean, as long as it would fall within the definition of a professional office. I mean, and you'd look at it case by case. I mean, it's not supposed to be a, full service medical, operation. It's supposed to be a professional office. So there does come a point when it goes from being a professional office where a doctor works out of to something perhaps broader than that, where we might say that's really exceeding the intent of the zoning code. But it would be, look, you go to a doctor's office might have an x-ray machine. Doctor's office might do, limited same-day procedures. A dentist's office might perform dental surgery in a facility like that. I think that's really what we're talking about here.
All right.
I think as
Yeah.
long as it's clear somewhere that no overnight stays are allowed, and maybe that's what you're saying is the difference between a medical office and a medical facility.
Yep. It's really a professional office, because again, there's no medical office is not defined in our zoning code at all. It's called a professional office. And traditionally, when you think of what professions are, you think law, engineering, and certainly dentistry and doctors would fall within what a professional office would be. So again, the argument is that, well, look, I mean, that's an understood professional office. If someone were to come in and ask to open a doctor's office under that professional office provision, that would seem to be under the zoning code, something that would be permissible right now. But I do believe there is a distinction already regarding the overnight stay issue, but we'll double check to be sure of that.
And
the
other, be sure.
the
And
other
I'm a little nervous about the same day surgery stuff. I mean, like simple things, but if we're going to be starting with operating rooms and whatever, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Makes me a little concerned.
The other question I had is a lot of these medical offices like PM Pediatrics and City MD, they have late night hours and weekend hours too. It's not overnight, but they're open late. So I guess that would have to be looked at as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if the code has any particular restrictions on hours of operation, but I can certainly bring that up and check that out. I don't know offhand.
I believe the current code has no limits on essentially the hours. And I think it was omitted because they never thought that this was going to go from office or office use, office building or office use, including business, professional, and governmental, that we would now be coming and outreaching to, is this Mrs. Jones coming back in that had, minor surgery and they just want to check the wound, so to speak, and make sure it's healing properly. But Steve's 100% right. They may have an X-ray machine and they just want to make sure that, you know, they're moving forward without going through referring people back to the hospital to stand in line and go through a complete X-ray situation. They can just do it for the office purposes. So
We need to take a good look at this because same-day surgery centers are opening up all over, and they're not healthcare facilities because healthcare facilities are considered overnight stays. They're hospitals.
Right.
They're ambulatory surgical things, no different than a doctor's or dentist office.
Right.
You go and have, you know, implants done or something like that where you're under anesthesia and all the other stuff. So we need to figure out whether, you know, where we're going with that. And, you know, you're looking at procedures like now they have same day placement. They have, you know, shoulder surgery, knee surgery, you know, you need, so usually orthopedic,
colonoscopies,
correct?
one day, in, out, done. Yeah.
Colonoscopies are done. There's a colonoscopy center right in the,
Excelsior.
Yes, there is.
And keep in mind, I mean, obviously, you know, there could be some grandfathering issues here. But, you know, this is more dealing with this on a going forward basis. So, I mean, if the council felt, hey, you know, we want to draw a line between procedures that are conducted, say, under anesthesia, under general anesthesia versus, you know, again, setting somebody's cast in an orthopedic doctor, right? I don't think anybody's really going to have a problem with that. But, you know, colonoscopies are, you know, a pretty intensive use. I mean, you know, you're going to be, you know, you're going to be knocked out. You're going to be in a recovery room. I mean, it's that almost seems like a medical clinic rather than a professional office, right? So, I mean, if the council wants to make clear that that's a distinction to make, you know, we can look and see whether we need to act on that. And if so, you know, work on that as part of the zoning code changes, because that would seem to me that the dividing line would be almost, you know, define what a medical clinic is, distinguish it from a professional medical office, and go from there.
Clearly not looking to not allow, you know, medical uses of that type. They're very useful and they're necessary. It's just that we have to come up with a definition of what we're going to have as office, professional use, and medical use. That's all.
So let me ask you something. So in Prosper Avenue and the Excelsior building, they do colonoscopies.
Yes, it is.
But is that hospital zone or not?
No, Excelsior building in Prosper Avenue.
No, it's not.
Is it
Well,
the UN? I
they
think
do-
it's the UN zone. I think they were talking about as the zone where there was some question.
Yeah,
Right.
no, he's where they're doing the colonoscopies now. That's right on Prospect by the hospital. I
Yeah,
don't know
by
if that's
Excelsior.
a hospital zone, because then it would be
Yeah.
allowed or not.
Yeah, because there's an HCS. There is a specific HCS zone that is specifically for, you know, more higher intensity medical use. There is a zone. I don't know where that zoning boundary begins and ends off the top of my head.
Okay.
Last is a discussion on 2021 bond ordinance, various capital improvements. Jim Megan, are you on?
Yeah, I'm here to.
Okay.
Okay. City manager asked me to speak a little bit about the bond ordinance. It's on for introduction tonight. This is ordinance number 11-21. It's a bond ordinance for $2,590,000. Basically, it's for a couple of projects that we've been working on. And these are projects that are either partially funded or projects that we're going to expand the scope on. For example, the 2021 road program. What we did was we had the engineers design a number of streets, a lot of streets. We're going out to bid on April 25th. And our original plan was to award as many of these streets as the funding, as last year's funding would account for. But what we decided to do was to expand the funding and try and increase the number of streets that we're going to be awarding at that bid. Right now, when we go out to bid, the bid includes Fair Street from Lodi to Kansas, Campbell from South State to New Street, Catalpa from Main Street to the dead end, And then we have a number of alternates that include Lookout from Prospect to Clarendon, American Legion Drive from Summit to First Street, and Clarendon from Passaic to Ross. Now, in addition to that, there's also, there's going to be a separate a bid for Second Street because we got a DOT grant for Second Street. So part of the ordinance tonight is to try and award as many of these streets when we go out to bid on April 25th. This project has basically been spearheaded by Councilman Battaglia. Yeah, and we'd really like to thank him for, for the help he's given us in that. Another one of the projects that's on is Stide Park. Now, Stide Park is partially funded. We went out to bid on June 24th. And one of the reasons that we went out to bid was to find out how much more we needed to fund. This project has changed a lot. It's expanded, the scope has changed a couple of times. And rather than fund it before we went out to bid and take a guess on how much we needed, we went out to bid first. So now we know how much is needed. And so in addition to the 2021 road program, there's also money in this bond ordinance for Stide Park. And similarly, we want to thank Councilwoman von Rudenberg for the work she's been doing in heading up the whole Stide Park project. The last two things that are in the bond ordinance is an expansion of the improvements that we're doing at Columbus Park. We have an open space grant for Columbus Park, but we made the decision to do more work, involving improved drainage, paving of the basketball courts, and fencing, which wasn't in the original project. And finally, we also have money in this ordinance to do specific improvements to certain intersections on Prospect Avenue where there are safety concerns. Specifically, we're talking about the intersections of Prospect Avenue and Atlantic, Prospect and American Legion Drive, Prospect and Berry, and Prospect and Gulf. The reason for that is we've had our traffic people look at it. They've made recommendations. We've had our engineers look at it and given us estimates. So since we have everything in place, that's included in this bond ordinance as well. Okay, so as I said, the total ordinance is $2,590,000. It's on for introduction tonight. The public hearing and the adoption will then be at the April 23rd meeting. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
April or March?
March.
Oh, did I say April? I'm sorry.
Yes.
March
Okay.
12th is
You scared
the
me. You
public
scared
hearing
me.
and the adoption.
Yeah, I started looking at the paperwork.
Sorry.
Okay.
If there are no other questions, I'm going to ask Jim and thank him for his time, and I appreciate the update and informing the council. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
All right. With that, need a motion to open to the public, please.
And that would complete my report, Mayor.
Oh, thank you.
I offered.
Second.
Roll call?
Councilmember Von Rudenberg,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Canestrino,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Sims,
Aye.
Councilmember Battaglia,
Aye.
Mayor LaBrus.
Aye. At this point, anybody from the public who would like to speak, please come forward. Unmute your device, give your name to the clerk and your place of residence, please. Or city.
Richard Salkin, Hackensack, New Jersey. Just a few things. As far as your whatever you're doing with the medical offices, I guess about the only litmus test you could use is overnight, because these things are all over. I mean, I had cataract surgery over at a place in I guess it was Elmwood Park, and it's it's like an assembly line, and it's daytime, and it's it's heavy duty. There is some anesthesia going on, so I don't know if that's going to be the litmus paper. You've got anesthesia going on across the street from me, as was pointed out at the Excelsior, the colonoscopies. I don't know how much better you can define it than that to make sure it's just not overnight stuff. That's not why. I've mentioned the situation on Atlantic Street. I know the bus stop for the county circular loop was moved a little bit east. Is that the end of whatever's going to be done?
No, sir.
Okay. I'll leave that. You don't have to go into detail, Ted. I'm happy to hear that, and I'll leave it alone.
you know, my job is to find a better mousetrap, so we're working on it.
Okay, it's good enough for me.
Thank you.
I want to raise this because, as you might imagine, I get phone calls. People like to pick my brain regarding municipal government law, election law, etc. In 2017, there was a change in the format of the election, the ballot. It was upheld by the court, as you all know. I'm understanding that there's some ambiguity this year. Can I direct this through the mayor to the city clerk? Have you decided on what the format of the ballot will be?
Well, Mr. Salkin, can you clarify what you mean by ambiguity? It's kind of hard to.
I'll be very frank. Two separate entities have contacted me saying they specifically asked the city clerk, will it be as it was in 2017 with the columns for the slate, or will it be back to the traditional, what used to be for about 90 years, one long column? So that's my question. I don't seem to be getting an answer.
Well, I was going to say, Mr. Salkin, why don't you finish your comment? I just didn't know if you were. Are you finished with your 3 minutes? Do you want to finish?
I'm asking a question. I have nothing else to say.
Okay. Well, I mean, you know, and again, the city clerk, I think at this point, you know, from my conversations with her, is still at this point reviewing and has a couple days to, you know, sign off on the petitions and make sure that, you know, they're all valid. And then at that point, I think, you know, she'll be in a position to. And by the way, I have no reason to believe that all the petitions submitted, that all 3 slates will, you know, should appear on their face so far, I think, to be okay. But, you know, I think you need to sort of make sure that that's the case and take it sort of one step at a time. And then you go forward at that point and determine, you know, exactly how to proceed forward. The clerk, as you know, sort of has the discretion in terms of that issue. But I think that's step 1. And then step 2 can be, you know, all right, this is exactly how we're going to do it, you know, have the drawing. And last time when we did this, I don't know if you were present, but I remember there were council present where, you know, we had a mock-up of exactly where it was so everybody could see exactly how it was going to look and where everything was going to go. And that certainly,
So,
you know,
excuse me, Stephen, are you actually saying it could revert back to the old way of one long column? I mean, after all that,
I mean,
you were in court on that, as I recall.
Yes, that's right. The court decision is the clerk has reasonable discretion to design the ballot in the best way that she believes that it will best effectuate the will of the voter. So ultimately that depends on, like you said, how many people are running, you know, exactly what the circumstances are. So the clerk is not legally precluded from, you know, either ballot design. And all I'm saying to you is I think that will be determined once the petitions are verified. That's step 1. Make sure all 3 slates are fine. Make sure there's nobody complaining.
Well, suppose there's only 2 slates. What's the difference? I mean, it's a simple, you know, it's a real simple question. And I'm starting to suspect that there's something else at work here. I'm sorry. This is nonsense. This is really nonsense. Thank you for your time.
Next person from the public, please.
Hello?
Yes,
Hello?
please give your Clark.
Yes, Dennis Ferrioli. I just can't get on the video. That's okay. I could just speak if it's okay with you.
Sure, Dennis.
Okay, yeah. In regards to the parking issue on Hamilton and Anderson, I live on Anderson, 384 Anderson. I noticed, you know, like I said, over the years, you guys are aware it's become an issue. What I don't understand that somebody said earlier that because of the apartments, it's becoming a problem. Well, the apartments have been there since before I was born. The apartment quantity has not changed. It just seems to be that it's not the parking issue I have a problem with, because it is a public street. I will give them that much. But the problem I have is that they're parked in front of my home. I live 2 blocks away from Passaic Street and Prospect, and the cars sit here for 3-4 days at a time. Now today, on my street, on the north side of Anderson, there was street sweeping, okay? And also on Hamilton, and I'm sure other streets in the area. About 11 cars between Hamilton and Anderson, between Summit and Prospect, did not move. The street sweeper went around them, and there was no cop or constable or anybody issuing tickets. I just think that this is a runaway train. And honestly, all due respect, it's not your fault, but it's a runaway train. And these people that, I guess, like you said, live in the apartments, whether they're condos or co-ops or apartments, it's irrelevant to them. It's irrelevant to them. When I asked one person, you know, I said, I thought they were having an affair. So what are you doing parking in front of my house for 3 days at a time, and then you show up? And they looked at me like I had two heads. And honestly, I don't understand the problem where these owners of these buildings take in the rent, they sign leases, and they don't have adequate parking, yet it gets spilled into the streets in front of homes like mine. It just, I'm ranting, but it doesn't seem like it's a good thing for the neighborhood. My neighbor, Linda, is selling her house. I'll be selling my house in the next year once COVID, you know, drops and gets a little bit better, but it doesn't seem like it's getting better. It seems like it's getting worse. And with all the buildings going up, you know, on the other end of Anderson, down by Sears, you know, you're building these enormous buildings on Kinderkamak, on Johnson Avenue. What is being done with the parking? It seems like it's an afterthought, and I don't understand it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ferrioli. I can tell you this, on all the new buildings, the requirements for parking are much different than apartments like some of the ones there close to you by Prospect and some of the other ones there on Passaic Street. They have a parking requirement, and we're very strict on the parking requirements on those buildings. And some of them are actually overparked. But I think one of the issues we have, and I think some of it goes in cycles, is certain areas all of a sudden, you know, maybe you only had one car and then you have a family, and a few years down the road, all of a sudden you have 4 cars. I think that's one of the issues we're running into in certain areas as well. But I wish when you see people parking, not moving their cars, don't be, you know, and I know it's no fun to do, but give us a shout.
I do. I have on many occasions, and I know you guys got, you know, bigger things to worry about. Even like the police department, you know, I mean, they're officers, they uphold the law. It's like, you know, the last thing I want to do is be, you know, I'm getting to be the old man on the street, and I don't want to be that guy that, you know, next thing is get off my lawn, and I don't want to go down that road. You know, it's one of those things. It's just, you know, like I said, it's just a matter of, I know we have Dean, who's the constable in Hackensack, and he does a great job. But like I said, even when these people who park on the streets repeatedly, they see that there's no recourse when they don't move their car. Well, you know, maybe next time there'll be 15 cars, then 18 cars, then 20 cars who don't move. And aside from the optics, the city is losing revenue. Let's face it, not giving a ticket out is lost revenue.
Agreed.
I pay over 20 grand in taxes, and I would appreciate them getting some revenue someplace else. I wouldn't mind it.
Absolutely. So I'm going to talk to the city manager, and, you know, we need to step up enforcement, obviously. So,
yeah, I mean, I'll even help if they need help. It doesn't matter to me. Just to, you know, whatever it takes. I mean, I don't know. I mean, well, a lot of my neighbors are very disgruntled, and except they know that I am one of the few that actually expresses it, you know, out in public. And if I have to take on that role, I'll do it. I mean, it's not a big deal. I'm being as polite as I can and as respectful to my neighbors as I can. You know, we all live in Hackensack. It's just a matter of, you know, I mean, come on. You know, I would, it isn't my neighbors who are parking in front of their houses or my house. It's people who live, you know, 2-3 blocks away. And that seems to be the problem.
all right, Mr. Ferrioli, thank you for your, bringing it to our attention, and I'm going to have them step up enforcement, especially in that area.
Thank you, guys. Be well. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Next person from the public, please.
Good evening, Bridget Rucker, Hackensack.
Yeah.
I'm calling on the last COW meeting where you guys passed the, I guess, bill for the city to have Juneteenth holiday. So I'm quite sure you have seen North Jersey newspaper and the article that was in the newspaper about North Jersey having slaves. And here in Hackensack, we do have a street that is Zabrinsky, which was part of that slave trade. So since you want to do Juneteenth and you want to gather those votes, how about you put in an ordinance to change that street to Freedom Way? So that way people don't have to look at that street knowing the history. So if you do your history, you start to learn about what's happening here in Hackensack with these different streets and how they got named and how the slave trade was right here in North Jersey. If you didn't see the article, I would suggest that you actually Google it, look it up, read it, and then start looking at some of these streets where you can make changes here. If you want to have inclusion, if that is.
Finish your paperwork.
Excuse me?
Oh.
If that is the way you are trying to go here in Hackensack at this time in 2021. Okay, so think about that and have a wonderful evening.
You too, ma'am. Thank you. Next person from the public, please. Hearing none, motion to close to the public.
Offer.
Second.
All in favor?
Wait, Mayor, I think you had somebody try to say something?
You do. Hi, Doug Garofalo. I'm at 342 Anderson Street. First, I'd just like to commend the police officers, Frank McCall on traffic and his team. During the blizzard and the subsequent snow, they did an excellent job driving around, telling people to move their cars. Our own neighbors actually kept their cars in the street. I approached 2 or 3 and they said, yeah, we'll move maybe. And they just did it. Frank went around and I actually heard him when I was shoveling the snow. As professionally as possible, he was discussing the situation with one of the residents and the resident was obstinate. And he said, well, I don't care, tow it. Doesn't matter to me, tow it. And Frank explained the fees and everything. And the guy just said, fine, whatever. And Frank said, okay, you're forewarned that this will happen if you do not move it. But Frank does a great job. Your whole team does a great job. And like Mr. Ferrioli said, we're 2 or 3 houses in from Prospect. And I witnessed neighbors around the block do exactly what he said. They park in front of our houses, almost at the edge of the street where it's at the crosswalk, and they'll leave it there for 3 or 4 days straight. They do move it right before the street cleaning. They'll just move it to the other side. The question I have is, with this new ordinance about resident stickers, is it residents of the specific section of our section or Hackensack residents?
I believe the way it reads, Doug, it's Hamilton and Anderson Street residents.
Right, and you have to show proof of your registration has to match your residence, so a utility bill, a tax bill, whatever it is, right?
Correct.
Okay, good. So that'll eliminate all the out-of-state plates that are always on our street as well. We have a half dozen out-of-state plates that I think he's an Uber driver. He's got an Uber license in the city, and so he's always around. He lives around the block. There's 2 or 3 others that are always there. So we really, really appreciate this ordinance and everything that the city's doing for our street. It was great to see the street cleaner come today on our section. We're south of Mr. Ferrioli. We had no cars, but I guess up by him, they were all still parked there. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else from the public before we close? Motion to close.
Offer.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Need a motion to close executive session.
Offer.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to close the council of the whole.
Offer.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
See everybody in about 10 minutes.
Thank you.